Is this Sean Combs' final week behind bars following last week's hearing at Bell? We'll analyze what has transpired and what might happen next for the struggling rapper who is currently detained while awaiting trial on federal sex crime charges. Welcome to Crime Sidebar, presented by Crime Law. I'm Jesse Weber. This could be an exciting week in the story of Sean Diddy, and why Sean Combs might be released from jail just in time for Thanksgiving. It seems like a possibility. You know, I would say that it sounds very, very unlikely. But after what we saw on Friday during the latest bail hearing before Judge Aaron Submanin, the current judge on the criminal case, a judge who has never heard this bail issue before, it seems much more likely. Let me explain. He has been held at the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, in Brooklyn since his arrest in September. And of course, as you know, he is facing charges of sex trafficking, transportation to participate in prostitution. Specifically, from 2008 to 2024, he used force, threats, and coercion to make women participate in sexual activities, including having sex with male prostitutes, known as deviants. He runs a criminal enterprise involved in all sorts of illegal activities and violent acts like kidnapping and arson. Okay, we know that now, two previous judges, a district court judge and a magistrate judge, both denied Sean Combs bail, siding with the prosecution's argument that Combs is a danger to society. They allege that he is at risk of fleeing because of his wealth, power, and resources. Furthermore, he is alleged to have engaged in potential obstruction by contacting witnesses and victims in the case. This happened despite the defense offering a very large bail package of $50 million, house arrest with no use of phones or the internet, private 24/7 security to monitor him, and limitations on who could visit him. That leads to this hearing on Friday, once again before Judge Aaron Submanin, who has yet to decide on this matter since he is the most recently assigned judge to handle the case. Prosecutors are also equipped with more arguments and evidence for why, as we discussed earlier in Sidebar, they accused him in a letter to the court of violating Bureau of Prisons regulations while in custody at MDC. This, in itself, could be used to prove that if he cannot follow the rules while locked up inside, how can you think that he can be trusted on the outside? But setting that aside, not only did the prosecutors say that he engaged in improper communications, such as three-way phone calls on a monitored phone using access codes from other inmates' phones, but also using third-party text messaging services. They accuse him of doing all of this to instruct third parties to contact witnesses and even try to influence a potential jury pool. Prosecutors also allege that he staged a social media campaign around his birthday. You might recall this. His family released a video showing them wishing him a happy birthday, giving well wishes while he was on the phone. He was on the other end of the line, locked up, but you could hear them on the other end, all happy, everyone joyful. Prosecutors say the purpose of this was to influence potential jurors, and they have evidence to show that that was his intent. He might have said something. We'll get into that now, and there are plenty of other issues for both the prosecution and the defense. Regarding this bail issue, the best way to address all of this is really to review what was said in the hearing. Now, there's one thing I must mention about reviewing this hearing. There were no cameras in the courtroom, so we couldn't see it for ourselves. In fact, there were also some electronic devices allowed to be used under restrictions, so we are relying on reports from people in the courtroom about what happened. The first issue that arose in this hearing on Friday wasn't even about the bail money, but about what happened just a few days earlier. As you see, the defense accused the prosecution of improperly photographing attorney-client privilege documents and work product in Sean Combs' detention unit after a smuggling sweep at MDC. I must say the defense claimed this was actually a targeted operation against Sean Combs. The prosecutors denied this, saying they didn't even participate in the search, but the sweep happened, and an investigator from the Bureau of Prisons seems to have taken photos of the notebooks and pages from Sean's unit. Eventually, Judge Submanin, after the hearing, stated that the prosecution must destroy 19 copies of those photo pages and cannot use the evidence obtained from those photos in their arguments for bail. One of the things they wanted to claim was that Combs improperly reached out to a specific witness, which would be presented through one of these photo pages. Judge Submanin said he would have to address this at a later date to determine if there was indeed a privilege violation, and if there was, what the remedy would be. Sean's defense team has requested the indictment be dismissed and that the prosecution team from the Southern District of New York be disqualified. We'll review that now as we're sorting through these legal arguments. This just shows how important having a good lawyer is, right? So how could I mention that without talking about our amazing sponsor, Morgan & Morgan? This is the largest personal injury law firm in the United States, a proud sponsor of ours. And here's the deal. If you're injured, you need to know what your legal rights are and whether you can get compensation. Morgan & Morgan has a dedicated team of over 1,000 lawyers with an impressive track record of verdicts such as $12 million in Florida and $26 million in Philadelphia. These are higher than the highest insurance settlements in these cases. There are no upfront fees, and the whole process can be done directly from your smartphone. You can find out if you have a case in 8 clicks or less. So, if you're injured, you can easily start your claim at forthepeople.com. But going back to the hearing on Friday, Judge Submanin had an issue with the defense. Here's how things started. The defense argued that Sean Combs' notebook clearly had the word legal handwritten at the top, to indicate that this was privileged. Don't search through this. These are materials the prosecution cannot access. Judge Submanin said the notebook the defense presented to this court was an intact notebook with the word legal written on the cover. But when you look at the photos of the 2 intact legal notebooks taken during the sweep at MDC, you see there is no writing on the notebook, no legal written. So why would he want to know why the word legal was only written on that notebook after the fact, which wouldn't be favorable for Sean Combs or his lawyers? During the hearing, one of Combs' attorneys, Mark Ifo, stated that he was unsure when the word legal was written on the notebook and admitted that not all the notebooks had that label during the search. Judge Submanin is said to have asked, "The notebook you gave me, does it say legal from November 1st?" Meaning when the sweep took place. Ifo is said to have responded, "I'm not sure," which prompted the judge to warn the defense, saying, "Moving forward, ensure all your statements before the court are truthful." Not the best way to start, but that's how things began. From there, we move into the bail analysis and the main concerns of the prosecutors regarding bail. They do not trust Sean Combs to comply with pretrial release conditions. And they emphasized, as I mentioned earlier, allegations about what he has done at MDC. Currently, Judge Submanin is impressed with Assistant U.S. Attorney Christy Slavic. What do you say when you can't trust him, but you trust his private security team to monitor him 24/7 when he's under house arrest? Her response about this security team. She claims one of them is an accomplice of Sean Combs, whose phone had been confiscated, and another is a defense investigator in the case. She accused that investigator of contacting witnesses. In other words, this private 24/7 security team is working for Sean Combs. Ifo later responded in the hearing that they are proposing an independent security team and emphasized that Sean Combs would have to live under much more restrictive conditions while on house arrest compared to MDC. Judge Submanin asked Prosecutor Slavic, "Did you cite his wealth as an issue for his pretrial release? So can't he use it?" That was a key point both sides raised. You see, the prosecution says it's because he has the wealth, power, and resources to do whatever he wants outside and disregard the system. The rules that he should not be granted bail while the defense said they would create an expensive and extensive bail package to mitigate the risks perceived from his wealth. Prosecutor Slavic is said to have responded that they seek to continue detention not because of his wealth, but due to the danger he poses, especially his flight risk and obstruction of justice. The judge asked her to explain further about the obstruction argument, and while she emphasized what I mentioned earlier, she was asked if Combs was running a PR campaign from behind bars, like his birthday message campaign. Prosecutor Slavic alleged that Sean Combs had said in a recorded phone call while at MDC that he just needed one person, implying he was trying to influence the jury. This was said to affect the integrity of the proceedings and constitutes an act of obstruction. Then, Judge Submanin turned to another important point. He advised the prosecutors to prepare to discuss the case of former Aubameyang CEO Mike Jeff, who was recently arrested for federal sex trafficking in New York. Al would be tried in the Eastern District, not the Southern District where Combs' case is, but on the surface, the allegations are very similar to Sean Combs. Interestingly, Mike Jeff was granted bail with a $10 million bond. Judge Submanin essentially asked why Sean Combs was not granted bail at this point. Prosecutor Slavic referred to a letter the prosecution filed with the court before the hearing, in which they stated, "Okay, Mike Jeff was charged with paying dozens of men to engage in commercial sex acts. He used a security company to monitor and intimidate witnesses, but these points are only superficial similarities to Sean Combs." However, they also pointed out that Mike Jeff was not accused of committing violent acts like Sean Combs and did not use weapons, while Combs faced ongoing obstruction charges. Jeff's charges ended in 2015, while Sean Combs is only 55 years old. Interestingly, another of Sean Combs' attorneys, Alexandra Shapiro, participated in the hearing and argued with Judge Submanin that Jeff's case was actually worse than Combs. The reason is that prosecutors are accusing an international sex trafficking ring with victims being raped and forced into sex, while Combs doesn't face such severe allegations. She also said, "Guess what? He's not that young." This was an interesting exchange and highlighted the clear differences between the cases. Another point in the hearing I want to highlight is the infamous 2016 video clip released by CNN earlier this year, where Sean Combs allegedly assaulted his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, in a hotel hallway while he was only wrapped in a towel. Prosecutors suggested that Sean attacked her while she was trying to escape a predator, which is a clear example of sex trafficking. Again, this is evidence showing he poses a danger. Now, Judge Submanin has taken a very interesting action during the hearing. He pressed the prosecution on an argument presented by the defense that the video in question might not be accurate, as CNN could have edited or altered it. Prosecutor Slavic responded that it was a bit confusing when the defendant raised this issue, because there is really no dispute over what actually happened in the incident. The defendant had admitted to his actions and publicly apologized in an Instagram post. Indeed, 2 days after the video was released, Sean Combs apologized and emphasized that, regardless of whether the video was slowed down or edited by CNN, there is no dispute about the video's content. It clearly shows the defendant pushing, kicking, and dragging a female victim. While Judge Romanian was questioning Combs' lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, he asked him about the text conversations between the defendant and the victim, one of whom is believed to be Cassandra Ventura. The prosecution highlighted the texts to demonstrate that the victim was subjected to physical abuse and non-consensual sexual acts. However, lawyer Agnifilo argued that the texts needed more context and stated that the 2016 video actually aligns with their view. According to Agnifilo, this was a long-term relationship with consent and tension, and the relationship ended, but not due to sexual assault. He further suggested that regrettable physical actions may have occurred from both sides in this relationship. Regarding the accusations that Sean Combs contacted people improperly, lawyer Shapiro distinguished these situations, such as when the defendant asked someone to lie over the phone. She said this did not happen here. She also argued that when the defendant posted on social media, it was his First Amendment right to defend himself against a slew of negative media reports. Judge Subramanian asked why Combs couldn't do this through his lawyer, instead of involving third parties. Shapiro replied that they, as lawyers, don't actually handle those kinds of actions. The judge also pressured her about communications related to victims or witnesses. Shapiro denied that these were instances of obstruction and assured the judge that Sean Combs would listen to his lawyers and not do anything they advised against. However, prosecutor Slavic emphasized that the defendant had contacted a witness in the case, someone accused of being involved in several shocking incidents and ignoring the lawyer's requests. Sean Combs' lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, made the argument that the defendant would comply with the rules if granted bail, but Judge Subramanian rebutted by pointing out that if Combs cannot follow the rules inside the jail, he cannot be expected to follow the rules outside. Specifically, although Combs was instructed not to run a social media campaign around his birthday, he still wished to do so. Even sharing codes to make phone calls, which the defense suggested is common, is prohibited according to the jail's handbook. This led to an important question from the judge. Would house arrest truly be a viable solution? Mark Agnifilo suggested that if house arrest were applied, Combs would stay in Miami, where there would be a dock, but no boat. The judge heard this and stated that it would not be effective. The judge then asked if house arrest could be applied in New York, to which Agnifilo responded that there is an apartment on the Upper East Side with 3 bedrooms. The apartment would have 2 security guards, one downstairs who would not have access to phones or the internet except to communicate with Combs' lawyers. Additionally, Combs would not be allowed to contact any witnesses in the case. This may signal that Judge Subramanian is considering allowing bail before trial and house arrest. Although the judge also heard from pre-trial services, the agency that ensures federal criminal defendants appear in court and monitors their activities, the agency representative sided with the prosecution, stating that the conditions for Combs' release were insufficient. However, this representative also acknowledged that this was the only case they knew of where private security would be involved. How did the judge decide? Judge Subramanian indicated that he would make a quick decision next week regarding bail, and he requested both the prosecution and defense to submit letters to the court by noon on Monday. One of the key questions was whether Combs could speak out about his case. The defense cited the case of the United States v. Donald Trump to argue that Combs, as a criminal defendant presumed innocent, has a constitutional right to defend himself, including criticizing and speaking out against the prosecution and the criminal trial process in order to protect his freedom. The defense cited several legal cases in their letter to protect Combs' First Amendment right to free speech. The examples cited did not even remotely suggest harmful speech that courts have previously considered, such as testimony or cooperation that could affect the availability of a witness in a trial. The defense argued that Combs had not made public statements to discredit the trial or provide evidence to the media. His speech was unrelated to any effort to disclose court orders or discovery materials. The prosecution argued that the government is seeking a higher standard, which they claim would allow the entire media and government to wage a campaign against Combs' reputation. However, the defense emphasized that it is Combs' legal right to defend himself and respond to negative media coverage, which cannot be taken away. Sean Combs' defense team argued that the examples provided by the prosecution were baseless and should not be used to justify keeping Combs in custody. So how did the prosecution respond at the bail hearing on Friday? They went straight to the point in the first page of their letter to the court, stating that Columns's obstruction behavior was part of a long-standing pattern of violence that spans decades. They argued that this must be considered along with his obstruction behaviors to fully assess his level of danger under the Bail Reform Act. They emphasized that Columns' ongoing disruptive and violent behavior clearly shows that there is no way to dismiss the presumption of detention in this case. The prosecution also pointed out that the bail package presented by the defense was insufficient to guarantee the safety of the community, given the defendant's ongoing efforts to obstruct the case and the risk of flight. Therefore, they requested that Columns' new bail application be denied. What stands out is that Judge Subramanian did not immediately deny Columns's request for bail, as the previous two judges had done. Instead, he considered the possibility of house arrest and whether Columns could be released on bail to prove his innocence. Judge Subramanian noted that if Columns violated any conditions of his release, he would be sent back to MDC immediately and might not get another opportunity for bail unless there were special circumstances. This means that if Columns is released, he must strictly adhere to the conditions of bail and behave in the best possible manner. However, the government could still bring obstruction of justice charges against Columns, and if he violates his bail conditions, additional charges could be filed. If Judge Subramanian decides to deny Columns's bail, it seems that Columns will have one final chance to bring the issue before the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. His legal team had previously submitted a legal brief supporting his request for bail, but then they asked the court to delay a decision while they appeal to Judge Subramanian. If the appellate court accepts this appeal, Columns may have a chance to be released in the future. We will have to wait and see what decision Judge Subramanian makes. If he makes a decision soon, Columns may be released and reunited with his family just in time for Thanksgiving. We'll continue to monitor the situation in the coming days. Thank you all for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or any other podcast platform you use. I'm Jesse Weber, and I'll talk to you next time.